did you get your parents to let you eat as much candy as you wanted? My brother saved our entire house with his candy stash. We had the strictest diet of any family I knew. Anything with more than 5 ingredients was banned. No exceptions, no matter what. One time, my mom caught my brother with a ketchup packet in his pocket and reacted like it was Fent. Soon we were banned from every school trip or play date because my parents can't control what we eat there. Every lunch, we'd unpack our matching containers of raw vegetables and homemade hummus while everyone else ate pizza and cookies. Here come the rabbits. They'd laugh. My brother would just stare at his carrot sticks, jaw clenched. He was 12. I was 10. Old enough to know we were the weird kids. I'd already given up by then, accepted that this was my life until I turned 18, but it destroyed my brother. He told me how his friends would share bags of chips during recess, how they'd trade Halloween candy he never got to collect, and he tried everything he could to change their minds. He literally made a PowerPoint about Olympic athletes who eat McDonald's and still win gold medals. He printed out labels showing her $20 health bars had more ingredients than a regular granola bar. She said the ingredients were different quality. He even begged for just one normal snack per week if he ate healthy the other 6 days. That's how addiction starts, Dad said. When you're 18, you can poison your body all you want. My brother looked crushed. 18 was forever away. That's when my brother became an expert at fountain diving. He'd pretend to tie his shoe, scan for adults, then grab handfuls of coins from the fountain in seconds. He learned which parks had the most coins, which times people made wishes. He knew exactly which gas station clerks wouldn't ask questions about a kid buying jerky with wet quarters. He made me promise never to tell. In exchange, he'd share his stash with me. Doritos that tasted like freedom. It was our secret rebellion, and our parents never suspected a thing. So while they bragged to their friends about how healthy we were, or how we never even asked for junk food anymore, we'd be sitting on the bathroom floor, nibbling a Snickers bar in tiny bites to make it last. Then came that Tuesday in May. I remember because we were eating dinner, steamed broccoli and quinoa again, when Dad's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Tornado warning, take shelter immediately. The sky outside had turned this sick yellow-green color, like a bruise. The sirens started wailing, that horrible up and down sound that makes your stomach drop. Dad jumped up, storm shelter in the basement, now! Mom ran to the fridge, grabbing her glass containers of cut vegetables, her precious kombucha. We might be down there for hours, she said. Thunder cracked so loud our house shook. The basement was dark. We huddled in the corner while the storm raged above us. It sounded like our house was being torn apart. Mom tried to stay calm. Good thing I grabbed our vegetables. We have plenty of fresh food. My brother caught my eye in the darkness. We both knew those vegetables wouldn't last 3 hours in this heat, let alone 3 days. The tornado passed right over us. It sounded like a train was driving through our living room. Mom was praying. Dad held us tight. I thought we were going to die. Hours passed. The heat in that basement was suffocating. Mom's vegetables were already getting slimy. The yogurt she'd grabbed was basically soup. My stomach was cramping from hunger. That's when my brother finally spoke up. Zip. He unzipped his backpack. Even in the dim light, I could see Mom's face change when she saw what was inside. Processed everything. The forbidden foods, candy bars, chips, crackers, canned ravioli. Where did you get this? Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been saving it, he said, for emergencies. We were trapped in that basement for 20 hours. 20 hours of eating my brother's toxic junk food because it was the only thing that hadn't spoiled. Dad practically cried when he bit into a Snickers bar. I forgot peanut butter could taste this good, he said. Mom ate the beef jerky in silence, tears running down her face. When the rescue crews finally reached us, they said we were lucky. Other families in our neighborhood had run out of food completely. The organic family 3 streets over had to be evacuated after just 10 hours, one firefighter told us. Nothing they had was shelf-stable. Mom hugged my brother for what felt like forever. When she finally pulled back, she was crying harder than I'd ever seen. That's when she told us the real reason my parents banned sugar. She took this shaky breath that made her whole body tremble and her hands went to her stomach like she was gonna be sick. The words started spilling out fast, like water breaking through a dam, about how 8 years ago she got into this bad car accident and the doctors put her on painkillers. OxyContin at first, then stronger stuff when that stopped working, and before she knew it, she couldn't get through a day without them. She kept rubbing her arms while she talked, these quick nervous movements, and explained how sugar made those old cravings come back so strong it scared her. Dad jumped in right then, his hand on Mom's shoulder, explaining how he'd found her passed out in the bathroom when my brother was 4 and I was 2. His voice cracked when he described calling 911 and thinking she was dead, how the paramedics barely got her breathing again. He enforced all those food rules to protect her sobriety, to keep our family from falling apart again. My brother's face changed so fast it was like watching a switch flip. He went from confused to understanding to pure rage in about 3 seconds, and he stood up so hard his chair crashed backward against the basement wall. So we paid for your recovery with our entire childhood? The words came out like he'd been holding them back with a dam that just broke. His hands were shaking and his face had gone this weird pale color except for 2 red spots on his cheeks. I sat there frozen between them all, my brain trying to process everything while my stomach twisted into knots. Part of me felt grateful we'd survived the tornado and that Mom was still alive after her overdose, but this other part, this angry, burning part, couldn't stop thinking about all those years of being the weird kids, all those birthday parties we couldn't go to, all those normal experiences we missed, all because of Mom's addiction. My stomach churned with guilt for feeling mad at her when she'd clearly been struggling with something so serious. The rescue crews got us out that night and took us to the community shelter since half our roof was gone. The next morning, we stood in the supply line with everyone else from our neighborhood, surrounded by tables full of donated food, Pop-Tarts and instant noodles and canned soup and boxes of sugary cereal, everything Mom had spent years protecting us from. Her hands started shaking when she saw it all. these little tremors that got worse when other families grabbed armfuls of processed snacks. My brother walked straight to the cereal table and grabbed 3 different kinds while staring right at Mom. Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, and Cocoa Puffs, holding them against his chest like treasure. I picked a normal sandwich from the cooler instead of the wilted salad. My first real sandwich with actual lunch meat in years. Mom's mouth opened like she was gonna object, but Dad put his hand on her arm and squeezed, and we all just stood there in this tense silence while volunteers smiled at us, not knowing they were witnessing our family's biggest standoff. Other families kept moving around us, grabbing supplies and chatting about insurance claims while we stayed frozen in our weird family drama bubble. In the parking lot afterward, Dad cleared his throat and suggested these could be temporary exceptions until we got back to normal. My brother and I looked at each other because we both knew temporary meant, until Mom decided she felt safe enough to ban everything again. That evening we sat in what was left of our living room, a tarp covering the hole where the window used to be, and my brother pulled out his backpack. He turned it upside down and all these wet quarters came tumbling out onto the coffee table, probably $30 worth. "I've been stealing from fountains for 2 years, he said, looking straight at Mom. "That's how desperate you made me." He proposed a deal right there, said he'd stop the fountain diving if we could have normal snacks sometimes, just sometimes, like other kids. Mom's face went white when she saw all those coins, her hand going to her mouth like she might throw up. She shook her head immediately and started talking about how we all needed family therapy to process the trauma properly and understand addiction better. She kept using words like disease and relapse risk and family system, while my brother's jaw got tighter and tighter until I thought his teeth might crack. Dad tried to mediate, suggesting maybe we could find a middle ground, but Mom wouldn't budge. She said sugar was her trigger, and she couldn't have it in the house, that her sobriety had to come first for all our sakes. 3 days later, when they finally cleared us to go back in our house, Mom went straight to my brother's room while we were unloading stuff from the car. I followed her and watched from the hallway as she pulled out his hidden stash from behind his dresser, from inside his old soccer trophy, from the gap between his mattress and box spring. She threw it all in a garbage bag, every candy bar and bag of chips he'd bought with those stolen quarters. My brother stood in the doorway watching her, his face completely blank like he'd shut down all his emotions, but I could see his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Mom left the room carrying that garbage bag like it was toxic waste while my brother just stood there frozen in place, stealing from fountains for 2 years just to buy some chips. That's quite the secret operation this kid was running, though I wonder how many wet quarters those gas station clerks really accepted without raising an eyebrow about where a 12-year-old got soaking coins. I waited until everyone was asleep that night before sneaking downstairs to the big trash can outside. The bag was right on top and I dug through it in the dark, feeling around until my fingers found a Snickers bar that wasn't too crushed. I stuffed it in my pajama pocket and crept back upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake everyone up. In my room, I wrapped the candy bar in an old sock and hid it in the back of my drawer behind my winter clothes. Just having it there made me feel like I had some control back, like I was picking a side in this crazy war our family had become. School started the next week and lunch was even worse than before because now everyone knew about the tornado. Kids whispered about how we survived on junk food while our organic vegetables rotted, still calling us rabbits, but with this weird respect mixed in. Some kid asked if we were allowed to eat normal food now, and I just stared at my carrot sticks without answering. 3 days into school, the counselor pulled me aside after she saw me stuffing crackers from the cafeteria into my pockets. She took me to her office with its motivational posters and asked how things were at home, her voice all gentle and concerned. I was so tired of keeping secrets that I almost told her everything, but instead just shrugged and said we were fine. She gave me a pamphlet about family counseling that talked about finding balance between safety and letting kids be kids. She said it might help everyone communicate better, and I actually felt this tiny bit of hope that maybe someone could fix our mess. When I showed Dad the pamphlet that night, his face got all tight and he said we didn't need strangers telling us how to raise our kids, but his voice sounded more scared than mad. That weekend we went to the gas station for gas, and my brother walked right up to the chip aisle while Mom was still in the car. He grabbed a bag of Doritos and paid for it with his own money right in front of her through the window. Mom started shaking and crying and couldn't breathe properly, gasping for air while Dad rubbed her back and told her it would be okay. My brother just stood outside eating his chips one by one, staring straight ahead like he couldn't even see her panic attack happening. That evening, Mom said she was going to a recovery meeting and asked if we wanted to come listen to understand what she was dealing with. My brother said no way at first, but I convinced him we should at least know what was going on with her. We sat on metal folding chairs in a church basement while strangers talked about cross addiction and how one thing leads to another. This woman talked about how her kids' Halloween candy made her want to drink, and Mom was nodding along with tears running down her face. One man said his family had to lock up the vanilla extract because the alcohol content triggered him. Another woman said she couldn't even walk past the wine aisle at the grocery store without her hands shaking. In the parking lot afterward, my brother looked Mom straight in the eye and told her he wasn't responsible for her recovery. He said he was 12 years old and shouldn't have to manage her problems, and she just stood there crying harder. Later that night, after Mom went to bed, Dad sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He told us he'd been using the food rules to control his anxiety about Mom relapsing and what the neighbors would think if she did. He said every time we ate sugar, he imagined Mom drunk again, and it made him panic, so he just banned everything to feel safe. His voice was shaking when he admitted he didn't know how to protect us and manage her recovery at the same time. He said he was drowning trying to keep everything perfect, so nobody would know how broken we really were. My brother asked him point blank if he even cared that we were miserable, and Dad started crying, saying of course he cared, but he was so scared of losing everything again. The next morning, Mom came downstairs upstairs and said she'd been thinking all night about what my brother said at the meeting. She pulled out a notebook where she'd written down all her fears about us eating sugar and how each one connected to her drinking. She showed us how she'd convinced herself that controlling our food would keep her sober. Like if she could manage our diet, she could manage her addiction. She said she needed to find her own recovery without making it our responsibility, but she didn't know how to start. My brother pulled out his phone and showed her a Reddit thread about kids of addicts and how they felt growing up. Mom read story after story about kids who had to hide normal behaviors and felt guilty for existing, her face getting paler with each one. She kept saying she never meant for this to happen, that she just wanted to protect us from her mistakes. Monday morning changed everything when the phone rang during breakfast, and Mom picked it up with her usual cheerful voice that dropped immediately when she heard who was calling. It was Janice from the support group, and she was telling Mom that security at the park had reported seeing a kid diving into the fountain for coins multiple times over the past few months, and they'd finally gotten a clear photo from the cameras. Mom's hand started shaking as she held the phone, and Dad grabbed it from her to hear what Janice was saying while my brother and I sat frozen at the table, knowing exactly what this was about. The fear in their eyes when they turned to look at my brother wasn't anger, but something worse, like they were seeing him for the first time as someone they didn't know. That evening after a silent dinner, Dad went straight to my brother's room and started searching through everything while we all watched from the doorway. He pulled out the backpack from under the bed and unzipped it slowly like he was defusing a bomb. Inside were these detailed hand-drawn maps of every fountain in town, with notes about which ones had the most coins and what times were best for collecting them without getting caught. There were lists of which gas stations didn't check IDs and which vending machines gave the most snacks for the least money. Pages and pages of planning that must have taken months to create, all in my brother's neat handwriting with different colored pens for different categories. Mom picked up one of the maps and traced her finger over the routes he'd marked from our house to each fountain and back again. Dad found a notebook with dates and amounts showing my brother had been doing this for almost a year, keeping track of every penny he collected and what he spent it on. The scope of it left them completely speechless, just standing there holding all this evidence of how desperate their son had been to eat normal food. My brother finally broke down, sobbing harder than I'd ever seen him cry before, saying he was just so hungry all the time and so tired of being the weird kid who couldn't eat what everyone else ate. I wanted to eat lunch without everyone staring, he cried, and his whole body was shaking as he told them about watching other kids trade snacks and share candy while he sat alone with his vegetables. Even Dad started crying then, which I'd never seen before, as my brother kept talking about how he felt like a prisoner in his own house and how he just wanted to be normal for once. Later that week, we all sat in Janice's office for our first family meeting, and she had this calm way of talking that made everyone relax a little bit. She worked out a trial system with us where we'd have a small snack allowance each week and clear rules about where we could store things, so Mom wouldn't have to see them if it was too hard for her. Everyone looked exhausted from all the crying and talking, but willing to try even though Mom kept wringing her hands and picking at her cuticles the whole time. Janice wrote everything down on a big whiteboard so we could all see the new rules clearly, and Mom took a picture of it with her phone like she needed proof this was really happening. Our first grocery trip with the new rules was absolute torture, as Mom gripped the cart handle so tight her knuckles turned white, while my brother and I carefully picked out granola bars and pretzels from the snack aisle. Other shoppers kept staring as Mom did these loud breathing exercises right there in the cereal aisle, counting to 10 over and over while we tried to act like this was totally normal. My brother grabbed a box of crackers and Mom flinched like he'd pulled out a weapon, but she didn't say anything, just kept doing her breathing. At the checkout, Mom started shaking so bad she almost ran out of the store, but she pulled out her phone and called Anna Rhodes, who was her sponsor from the support group. We all stood there awkwardly while Mom had Anna on speakerphone and repeated these affirmations about being strong enough to handle this and how our health mattered more than her fears. The cashier pretended not to notice as Mom kept saying, "I can do this," over and over, while Anna's voice came through the phone telling her she was doing great and to just focus on breathing. Other customers in line behind us shifted uncomfortably and tried to look anywhere else while Mom gripped the counter and whispered her mantras. The first day I was allowed to buy pizza at the school lunch felt completely surreal and wrong, like I was committing a crime right there in the cafeteria. I handed over my lunch money and the lunch lady gave me a slice of pepperoni pizza on a paper plate like it was nothing special, but my hands were shaking as I carried it to my table. I ate it anyway, tasting guilt and cheese in equal amounts, while my friends acted like this was totally normal because for them, it always had been. That evening, we established the official house policy where we'd keep a snack bin in the garage while the kitchen stayed Mom's safe zone where she didn't have to see any processed food. Fountain diving for chips money? This kid turned petty crime into a business plan complete with color-coded maps and profit tracking. That's some next-level snack dedication right there. It felt like we were living in two different worlds under one roof, with the garage becoming this weird neutral territory where normal food was allowed to exist. 2 days later, I caught my brother sneaking granola bars from the garage bin into his bedroom, which was breaking our new trust agreement about only eating snacks in designated areas. When I called him out on it, he looked ashamed, but said he couldn't help still feeling like it would all get taken away any second, and he needed to hide some just in case. My brother slowly walked back to the garage and put the snacks back in the bin, while I followed behind him feeling weird about being the one enforcing rules for once. We both stood there for a minute in silence looking at this plastic bin full of normal snacks that had caused so much drama in our family. This new normal where we were accountability partners instead of secret conspirators felt lonely and strange, like we'd lost something special between us, even though things were supposedly getting better. The next week, Mom got a call from the PTA president asking if she'd speak at their emergency preparedness meeting since everyone heard how we survived the tornado. Mom's hand shook as she held the phone, and I watched her face go so pale when the president mentioned how our story could help other families. She made up some excuse about work conflicts, but I knew the real reason was she couldn't stand up there and tell everyone their kids needed candy bars and beef jerky when she'd spent years preaching about toxic processed foods. After she hung up, she went straight to her room and didn't come out for dinner. 2 nights later, Dad came home with a plastic bag from the grocery store and pulled out a half-gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream like it was no big deal. He grabbed spoons from the drawer and started scooping it into bowls, while Mom stood frozen in the doorway watching him. She didn't say anything at first, but her whole body started shaking, and then she just turned and ran to their bedroom. We heard the lock click, and then muffled crying through the door, while Dad stood there holding the ice cream scoop looking lost. My brother pushed his bowl away and left without eating any of it. The ice cream sat on the counter melting while Dad knocked on the bedroom door trying to get Mom to come out, but she wouldn't answer him. My brother didn't come home until after 10 that night, and when Dad asked where he'd been, he just shrugged and went to his room. The next afternoon, I found him sitting by the fountain at the park downtown, except there was no water in it anymore. They'd drained all the fountains after the tornado for maintenance, and he was just sitting on the edge staring at the empty concrete basin where coins used to pile up. I sat next to him for a while, and neither of us said anything, but I could see his jaw working the way it did when he was really mad about something. He finally got up and walked to 3 other fountains around town, and they were all empty too. At the last one, he kicked the edge hard enough that I heard his toe crack against the concrete, and he limped all the way to the gas station on 5th Street. He pulled out a handful of wet quarters from his pocket that he must have been saving from before, and tried to buy a package of beef jerky, but the clerk shook his head and pointed to a new sign that said they couldn't accept damaged or waterlogged coins anymore. My brother's shoulders dropped, and he stood there for a minute before walking to the payphone outside. He called me, and his voice sounded small and broken when he asked if I could come get him. I told our parents I needed to return a library book that was overdue, and grabbed Mom's car keys before they could ask questions. The whole drive to pick him up, my stomach felt tight, because I'd never lied to them like that before. He got in the car without saying anything, and we drove home in complete silence while I kept thinking about how I was becoming someone who lied now, and how that was just another secret added to our growing pile. The next morning at breakfast, Dad was checking something on his phone, and his face went dark. He turned the screen toward us, showing the tracking app with my location history from yesterday, including the stop at the gas station on 5th Street. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate, and they both stared at us with this look of complete betrayal that made my chest hurt. Neither of them yelled, but somehow their quiet disappointment felt worse than any punishment they could have given us. They called Janice for an emergency session that afternoon, and we all sat in her office while she drew 2 columns on a whiteboard labeled "Can Control" and "Cannot Control." She made us each write things in the columns, and Mom's hand shook as she wrote "My Recovery" under "Can Control," and then stood there for a long time before finally writing "My Kids' Food Choices" under "Cannot." My brother wrote "What I Eat" under "Can Control," but didn't write anything in the other column. Dad wrote "Trying to Help" under "Can Control," and "Making It Worse" under "Cannot," which made Mom start crying again. I wrote "Telling the Truth" under "Can Control," even though I'd just lied yesterday. That Friday, my brother went crazy at lunch and ate 3 slices of pizza and 2 ice cream sandwiches, which I'd never seen him do before. 5th period, he threw up all over his desk, and the nurse had to call Mom to come pick him up. She had to leave her important work meeting, and when she got to the school, my brother was sitting in the nurse's office looking green and miserable. The car ride home was quiet, except for my brother groaning every time we hit a bump, and Mom didn't lecture him or say "I told you so." She just handed him tissues and a plastic bag and drove extra careful around the turns. When we got home, she helped him to his room and brought him water and crackers without saying anything about the junk food. That weekend, Dad knocked on my brother's door and asked if he wanted to learn how to make some food he actually liked that wouldn't make him feel sick. They spent 3 hours in the kitchen making turkey burgers from scratch, and Dad let him pick all the seasonings and toppings himself. My brother actually smiled when he took his first bite of the burger he'd made with his own hands. After dinner that night, I walked into the kitchen while my parents were doing dishes and pulled out the Milky Way I'd been hiding in my drawer since the tornado. Mom's hands stopped moving in the soapy water, and Dad set down the plate he was drying. I held it out to them and asked if I should put it in the garage bin with the other emergency stuff. They looked at each other for a second, and Mom just nodded and said to add it to the collection. No lecture, no disappointment, just a simple request to put it where it belonged. The next morning, we all sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, and Dad wrote house food rules at the top in his neat handwriting. Mom suggested an 80-20 approach where most meals would be healthy, but we could have normal snacks sometimes. My brother asked for a snack budget each week, and Dad wrote that down too. We agreed on keeping the garage bin stocked for emergencies, and Mom taped her meeting schedule to the fridge so we'd know when she needed extra support. It wasn't perfect, but at least we had actual rules now, instead of constantly guessing what was allowed. Later that week, I watched my brother pull out his old fountain diving map from under his bed. The paper was worn from being folded so many times and had water stains from all those wet quarters. He smoothed it out on his desk and studied all the marks he'd made showing which fountains had the most coins and which times were best for collecting. Then he folded it carefully along the same creases and put it in his desk drawer instead of throwing it away. He caught me watching and just shrugged and said we might need it someday. 3 weeks later, Mom came home from work looking shaky and pale. She went straight to her room, and I heard her on the phone with Anna for almost an hour. Dad made dinner that night, just simple pasta with tomato sauce, and we ate quietly while Mom pushed food around her plate. Later, Dad told us someone had brought donuts to Mom's office party, and she'd had to step outside and call her sponsor to get through it. She'd stayed sober, but it had been really hard for her. 2 months after the tornado, I was sitting in my room doing homework when I realized how different everything felt. We weren't sneaking food anymore, but we also weren't totally free either. Every meal, every snack, every grocery trip had this weird tension underneath it. Mom would watch us eat sometimes, not saying anything, but clearly thinking about something. Dad would check labels obsessively even on foods we'd already approved. My brother and I had stopped hiding candy, but we also didn't ask for it much because we could feel how hard our parents were trying. School got easier though when my brother started carrying granola bars and fruit snacks in his backpack without hiding them. Kids stopped calling us rabbits as much when they saw us eating normal snacks at lunch. We weren't the complete weirdos anymore, just the kids with the health-conscious parents. Normal felt different now, but at least we could sit with other kids without them making fun of our carrot sticks. Mom started going to a special support group on Wednesday nights for parents in recovery. She'd come home with worksheets about boundaries and triggers and healthy family dynamics. One night, she showed us a paper about letting kids make age-appropriate choices, and she actually tried to follow what it said. She stopped checking our backpacks every day and let us pick our own snacks from the approved list without asking permission first. Dad started therapy too, going every Thursday after work to deal with what he called his anxiety about Mom's recovery. What's Mom really running from when she locks herself in that bedroom? The ice cream or the fact that her whole belief system cracked open like those empty fountains? He stopped doing his nightly backpack checks, though I'd still catch him glancing at our bags sometimes when he thought we weren't looking. The therapist gave him exercises about trust and letting go of control. He'd practice them at dinner, taking deep breaths when Mom got quiet or when we asked for seconds of dessert. Progress looked like him not asking us 20 questions about what we ate at the school anymore. Then my brother got invited to a birthday party at the pizza place downtown, and our parents actually let him go alone. Well, not totally alone since other parents would be there, but without them watching his every move. He texted them pictures throughout the party showing him eating pizza and cake like a normal kid. Mom checked her phone constantly during those 3 hours, but she didn't call him once. Dad kept finding reasons to drive past the pizza place, but he didn't go inside. When my brother got home, they just asked if he had fun instead of grilling him about what he ate. At the school, I started talking to this girl, Teresa, whose mom kept coming up in my mom's recovery stories. Turns out Anna, who sponsored my mom, had a daughter my age in my grade. Teresa understood what it was like having a parent in recovery because her mom had been sober for 5 years. We'd eat lunch together and she'd tell me about how her family had their own weird food rules when her mom first got clean. She said it gets easier, but it never gets completely normal, and that was actually really helpful to hear from someone who got it. Our counselor suggested we try something she called practice meals, where we'd all eat normal food together in small amounts. The first time Mom put a fun-sized Snickers on the kitchen table and just stared at it for 20 minutes while we watched. Her hands were shaking and she kept doing these breathing exercises Anna taught her, but she stayed in her chair the whole time. My brother unwrapped the candy super slow like he was defusing a bomb, and Mom's eyes got all watery, but she didn't leave. We each took one tiny bite and chewed it for like a whole minute, and Mom made it through without running to the bathroom to throw up, which was huge. Every week we'd try something new and harder like Doritos or those little chocolate donuts from the gas station. Mom would grip the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white, but she'd sit there with us while we ate. Sometimes she'd have to get up and walk around the kitchen doing her breathing, but she always came back to the table. My brother started doing his homework at the kitchen table again instead of hiding in his room all the time. His grades went from C's and D's back up to A's and B's because he wasn't spending all his time making maps of which fountains had the most coins. His teacher called Mom to say how much better he was doing and asked what changed, but Mom just said we were working through some family stuff. The teacher had no idea my brother used to spend lunch trading fountain quarters for beef jerky behind the gym. We came up with this system where Mom would put a red magnet on the fridge when she was having a hard day with cravings. Those days we'd take our snacks to our rooms without arguing or trying to eat them in front of her. It actually worked pretty good because Mom felt like she had some control and we didn't feel like we had to sneak around anymore. Some days there'd be no magnet and we could eat chips on the couch while watching TV, and other days the magnet would be up for a whole week. 6 months after the tornado, they had this big neighborhood potluck to celebrate everyone rebuilding their houses. Mom brought her vegetable tray because of course she did, but when Mrs. Peterson offered us her famous mac and cheese, Mom didn't freak out. She watched us eat 3 helpings of casserole and 2 pieces of chocolate cake and only did her breathing exercises twice. Dad ate 4 brownies and Mom just squeezed his hand instead of lecturing him about processed sugar. Other parents kept saying how lucky we were to have such a calm mom after everything we'd been through with the tornado. One afternoon, my brother and I were sitting on the front porch sharing a bag of chips right out in the open. Mom was watching from the kitchen window and I could see her holding her coffee mug with both hands real tight. But she let us sit there eating our chips without coming outside to stop us or give us a lecture about chemicals. My brother offered me the last chip and I took it, and we just sat there like normal kids for once. That night at dinner, Dad mentioned maybe we could take a family vacation next summer to somewhere with real restaurants and ice cream shops. Mom didn't say yes, but she also didn't immediately say no and start listing all the toxic ingredients in the restaurant food. We all pretended like that wasn't the biggest deal ever and just kept eating our grilled chicken and vegetables. But later I saw Dad looking at hotel websites on his laptop and Mom didn't tell him to close it. Sometimes I still check my sock drawer even though there's nothing hidden there anymore. I remember that Milky Way I hid and how I had to pick between telling on my brother or keeping his secret. The drawer is always empty now, but I keep checking anyway, like it reminds me of everything that changed. My brother doesn't hide candy in the air vents anymore, but sometimes I catch him with a bag of chips in his backpack just in case. Mom still has bad days where she can't even look at a cookie without her hands shaking. I still lie sometimes about where I'm going when really I'm getting ice cream with Teresa. Dad still sneaks candy bars in his car and thinks nobody knows, but we all know. But we're trying, and that's more than we were doing before when everything was just rules and sneaking and fighting. We eat dinner together every night, and sometimes it's all vegetables vegetables, and sometimes there's pasta, and nobody runs away crying anymore. Mom goes to her meetings twice a week, and we don't ask her about them, but she seems calmer when she comes back. Life's not perfect, and probably won't ever be, but at least now we're all trying to figure it out together, instead of keeping secrets in fountains and sock drawers. Alright, that's a wrap, folks. Appreciate you letting me toss a little wit into your reading time. Seriously, you've been an awesome crowd. Catch you in the next one. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.